She wasn't supposed to come home early. If she hadn't, their lives would have been completely different. The palace kitchens had never been so quiet. Luna Elena Ashford had dismissed every servant before sunset, insisting she wanted to prepare dinner herself. The cooks protested politely, reminding her that queens were not expected to stand over simmering pots or knead bread with flour on their sleeves. She only laughed. "It's our mating anniversary," she said. "Let me spoil my husband for one evening." By the time she finished, the dining cart held Adrian's favorite roasted lamb, rosemary potatoes, fresh honey bread, and the blackberry wine he always opened on special occasions. Beside the dishes rested a small velvet box tied with a silver ribbon. Every few minutes, Elena caught herself smiling at it. That morning, the royal physician had confirmed what she had secretly hoped for. She was going to have a baby. She had imagined Adrian's reaction 100 different ways. Perhaps he would laugh. Perhaps he would cry. Most likely, he would sweep her into his arms the way he always did whenever life gave them something worth celebrating. Inside the velvet box rested a tiny silver baby rattle engraved with a crescent moon. She wanted it to be the first thing he saw. As she crossed the palace corridor, the halls felt strangely empty. Most of the household had gathered in the eastern gardens to prepare for the anniversary banquet. Only the flickering wall lanterns accompanied her footsteps. She reached Adrian's private study and raised her hand to knock. Before her knuckles touched the door, she heard someone crying. A woman. "I don't know who I am anymore." The voice was unfamiliar. Elena frowned. She had never heard anyone inside Adrian's private study without an announcement. Then Adrian answered quietly, "You don't have to face this alone." His voice carried the same calm warmth she had fallen in love with years earlier. Concern replaced curiosity. Perhaps someone had come seeking help. Without wanting to interrupt, she pushed the door open gently. The room fell silent. Adrian stood beside a beautiful blonde woman about Elena's age. The stranger's face was wet with tears. She had buried her face against Adrian's chest, while his arms rested gently around her shoulders. His hand moved slowly through her hair in silent comfort. For one impossible heartbeat, no one moved. The velvet box slipped from Elena's fingers. It struck the polished marble floor with a sharp crack. The silver ribbon came loose. Inside, the tiny baby rattle rolled across the floor before stopping beneath Adrian's desk. Both of them turned. Adrian's face drained of color. "Elena." He stepped away immediately. The blonde woman looked horrified. "No." She wiped desperately at her tears. "It's not what—" Elena raised one trembling hand. "You don't owe me an explanation." Her voice sounded strangely calm. Too calm. She looked at Adrian. Years of trust. Years of shared dreams. Years of believing she had been the happiest woman in the kingdom. All of it seemed to collapse into the unbearable silence filling the room. "I've seen enough." Adrian took a hurried step toward her. "Please, listen to me. I can explain." She smiled. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was the heartbreaking smile of someone who had already accepted what she believed to be the truth. "I hope," her voice almost failed, "that she makes you happy." The blonde woman shook her head frantically. "No! Please don't leave." But Elena had already turned. She walked through the doorway with quiet dignity, refusing to let either of them see the tears gathering in her eyes. The heavy oak door closed softly behind her. Only then did Adrian notice the velvet box lying open on the floor. He bent to pick it up. His fingers froze. Beneath the desk lay the tiny silver baby rattle. Its delicate handle had cracked when it struck the marble. He stared at it in confusion. Before he could speak, Elena was already gone, and neither he nor the frightened blonde woman realized that the broken keepsake lying between them was never meant to announce the end of a marriage. It had been meant to announce the beginning of a family. Elena didn't return to the banquet. The musicians continued rehearsing in the eastern gardens. Servants hurried through the palace carrying flowers and candles, wondering why the Luna had suddenly disappeared. No one noticed her quietly walking back toward the Luna wing. She closed the door behind her. For several minutes, she simply stood in the middle of the room. The silence felt louder than any argument could have been. Her eyes drifted across the life she had built with Adrian. Their wedding portrait hung above the fireplace. A half-finished blanket she had been knitting for winter rested beside the window. A vase of fresh white lilies, the flowers Adrian brought her every anniversary, filled the room with their gentle fragrance. She looked away. If she looked too long, she wasn't sure she would have the strength to leave. Slowly, she opened a traveling chest. She packed only the things that had belonged to her before she became Luna. Her mother's diary, a faded childhood photograph, a worn blue scarf embroidered by her grandmother, a small wooden music box that had survived every move she had ever made. Everything Adrian had ever given her remained exactly where it was. The jewels, the gowns, the royal seal. Even the Luna crown stayed upon its velvet stand. None of it belonged to the woman she believed she had become. She removed the silver mate bracelet from her wrist. For a long moment, she traced the tiny scratches across its surface. Each mark held a memory. A harvest festival. A winter journey. The day Adrian had nervously fastened it around her wrist and promised they would face every storm together. A tear slipped onto the silver. She wiped it away before another could follow. "No," she whispered to herself. "Not now." She carried the bracelet into Adrian's chamber. His side of the bed was untouched. The morning sunlight would find it empty. She placed the bracelet carefully on his pillow. Beside it, she laid a single folded letter. Inside were only 8 words. "I hope she's worth the life we're leaving behind." She almost wrote something else. About the baby. About the dreams they had shared. About how desperately she wished she had been wrong. Instead, she folded the page. Some truths no longer mattered. Before leaving, she walked one final time through the palace gardens. She paused beneath the ancient oak where Adrian had first asked her to become his mate. The carved initials they had scratched into the bark years ago remained untouched. She rested her fingers against them. "Goodbye," she whispered. Long before sunrise, a stable boy watched the Luna saddle her own horse. "Your Majesty," he asked sleepily, "should I wake the guards?" She smiled kindly. "No, I'm only taking a little journey." The boy nodded and opened the gate. He would later spend years wishing he had asked one more question. By the time dawn painted the eastern sky, Elena had disappeared beyond the capital. Adrian searched the palace until sunrise. Every servant gave the same answer. No one has seen the Luna. He reached the Luna wing already fearing the worst. The room was immaculate, too immaculate. The wardrobe stood nearly empty. The Luna crown remained. Her jewels remained. Everything remained. Except Elena. Then he entered his chamber. The silver mate bracelet rested upon his pillow. His hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. The words struck him harder than any blade. Before he could fully understand them, Captain Aldrin rushed through the doorway, carrying the velvet box from the study. "My king, we found this." Adrian stared at the broken silver rattle. Confusion clouded his face. "What is this?" The palace physician, who had followed close behind, suddenly went pale. He recognized it immediately. "Your Majesty." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "I confirmed the Luna's pregnancy yesterday morning." The room spun. Adrian's knees nearly gave way. Pregnant. Elena had been carrying their child. At that moment, another messenger arrived from the palace gates. The blonde woman. She's gone too. She vanished during the night. The only thing left behind in her guest chamber was an old silver necklace engraved with a crescent moon. 5 years changed everything. The kingdom still prospered beneath Alpha King Adrian Blackthorn's rule. Harvests were plentiful. Trade flourished. The borders remained secure. To the outside world, the Alpha Kingdom had never been stronger. Its king, however, had never been lonelier. Every month, new reports arrived from royal scouts. We searched the northern mountains. Nothing. The western ports. Nothing. The southern trade routes. No sign of the Luna. Adrian read every report himself. Not because guilt demanded it. Because he still believed Elena deserved the truth he had never been allowed to explain. The mysterious blonde woman had vanished the very same night Elena disappeared. No one knew her real name. No one knew where she had gone. Only the old silver necklace with its crescent moon remained locked inside the palace archives. Sometimes Adrian stared at it for hours, convinced it held an answer he simply couldn't see. He never remarried. When the royal council suggested choosing another Luna, his answer never changed. My wife is still alive. I will not replace her. The discussion ended there. Far beyond the kingdom's western cliffs, a small coastal village overlooked a quiet blue sea. There, Elena had built a life no one from the palace would have recognized. The villagers knew her simply as Elena, the gifted healer, the woman who never turned away anyone in need, the founder of a modest refuge where abandoned mothers found warm meals, safe beds, and the chance to begin again. The little girl racing barefoot through the herb garden each morning was the center of Elena's world. Lily, Elena called with a laugh. You promised not to chase the chickens again. 5-year-old Lily giggled as 3 frightened hens scattered across the yard. They started it. They looked at me funny. The women working in the garden burst into laughter. Elena scooped her daughter into her arms. You always have an explanation. I learned from you. Oh? You always explain why medicine tastes terrible. Elena laughed, despite herself. That isn't an explanation. It's a fact. Their laughter drifted toward the sea. For a few precious moments, the past no longer mattered. That evening, as Elena tucked Lily into bed, the little girl asked the question she had asked many times before. Mama, where's my daddy? Elena's smile softened. She brushed a strand of golden hair from Lily's face. He's far away. Does he not love us? The question pierced Elena's heart. She answered without hesitation. Oh, sweetheart, your father is a good man. He just made one terrible mistake. Lily frowned thoughtfully. Like when I put salt in the tea? Elena smiled. A much bigger mistake. But good people sometimes make those too. Will I meet him someday? Elena kissed her forehead. I don't know. But if you do, I hope you'll let him tell you his side of the story. Hundreds of miles away, Adrian stood alone in the palace observatory, looking toward the western horizon. He still carried Elena's letter inside his coat. Folded, worn. Read so many times the ink had begun to fade. I hope she's worth the life we're leaving behind. He whispered the words into the night. If only you'd listened. He closed his eyes. You would have known there was never another woman. At that very moment, royal physicians from 3 neighboring kingdoms gathered in the capital to confront a deadly epidemic spreading across the continent. Their search for a rare blood donor would soon uncover a truth hidden for 25 years and change the fate of 2 sisters who never knew the other still lived. The epidemic spread faster than anyone had feared. It began in the fishing villages along the southern coast. Within weeks, it crossed 3 kingdoms. Healers worked day and night, but the strange fever refused to yield to ordinary medicines. Victims suffered relentless chills, followed by dangerous inflammation that attacked the blood itself. Entire families crowded healing houses, praying someone would discover a cure before another loved one slipped away. The Royal College of Physicians gathered the finest healers and scholars from every neighboring kingdom. Among them was the kingdom's most respected physician, Dr. Aldous Merrick. After weeks of research, his team made a remarkable discovery. A handful of survivors carried an extraordinarily rare blood trait. Their blood produced natural antibodies capable of resisting the disease. If we can isolate this trait, Aldous explained before the assembled council, we may be able to create a treatment that saves thousands. Messengers were dispatched across the continent. Every healer was ordered to test patients with unusual immunity. The search soon reached the small coastal village where Elena lived. She welcomed the physicians without hesitation. "If Lily can help save lives," she said, "you may take whatever samples you need." The doctors smiled kindly at the little girl. Lily held out her tiny arm with surprising bravery. "Will this hurt?" Only for a moment. She squeezed her mother's hand. "I can be brave." "You already are," Elena whispered. Several days later, the laboratory report arrived. Dr. Aldous stared at the results in disbelief. "The child is a perfect match." His assistant looked over the records. "There is only one other confirmed carrier." He slid another file across the table. A woman identified only as Claire. She had recently volunteered at a refugee settlement after surviving the epidemic herself. Aldous frowned. "What are the odds?" The assistant shook his head. "Almost impossible. The mutation is extraordinarily rare for two unrelated people to share it." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The physicians immediately ordered a full genetic comparison. Normally, such testing was reserved for inheritance disputes among noble families. This case was different. Scientific curiosity had become medical necessity. Blood samples from Lily, Elena, and Claire were quietly transported to the Royal Laboratory. Days passed. Then one rainy afternoon, the final report arrived. The chief geneticist broke the royal seal. As he read the first page, his expression changed completely. "This can't be right." His colleagues gathered around him. He read the conclusion aloud. "Subject Claire and subject Elena Ashford share a biological relationship consistent with full siblings." The laboratory fell silent. One physician whispered, "They're sisters." Another slowly lowered himself into a chair. After all these years, further analysis estimated that the sisters had been separated for approximately 25 years. The records matched an old border raid in which dozens of children had disappeared. Among the missing, a little blonde girl whose body had never been found. Dr. Aldous immediately requested access to the royal archives. Hours later, another forgotten file surfaced. It belonged to Alpha King Adrian Blackthorne. 5 years earlier, before Elena disappeared, Adrian had secretly requested a confidential investigation into an unidentified woman carrying an antique crescent moon pendant. Witnesses reported the woman had claimed the pendant belonged to the only family she could barely remember. She believed she had been taken during a border attack as a small child. Adrian had recognized the design immediately. Elena wore an identical crescent pendant, inherited from her late mother. Rather than raise false hope, he had quietly ordered DNA testing before telling his wife. He wanted certainty. He wanted to surprise Elena with something she had dreamed about since childhood. A sister. One final report completed the heartbreaking picture. On the night Elena opened the study door, Claire had just learned the preliminary results suggested she truly belonged to Elena's lost family. She had broken down in tears. "I don't know who I am anymore," she had whispered. Adrian had embraced her. Not as a lover, as the brother-in-law of a frightened woman who had just discovered she might not be alone in the world anymore. That was the exact moment Elena had walked inside. 5 minutes. That was all. 5 more minutes, and Adrian would have introduced them. 5 fewer minutes, and Elena would never have seen the embrace. Instead, one perfectly timed misunderstanding had destroyed a marriage, separated a father from his unborn daughter, and stolen 5 irreplaceable years from an entire family. Dr. Aldous closed the file with trembling hands. There is only one thing left to do. He looked toward Adrian, who had been silently listening from the doorway. You need to find your wife. For the first time in 5 years, Adrian finally knew where to begin. 3 days later, Adrian stood at the edge of the same coastal village he had imagined 1,000 times. For 5 years, every search had ended in disappointment. Now, for the first time, he knew Elena was here. He had rehearsed countless apologies during the journey. Each one sounded meaningless. No explanation could return the years she had spent believing he had betrayed her. No apology could erase the lonely nights Lily had fallen asleep without knowing her father. So when he finally reached the small cottage overlooking the sea, he chose silence. Elena was gathering lavender outside the refuge when she saw him. The basket slipped from her hands. For several long moments, neither of them moved. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and wildflowers between them. Adrian looked older. The confident young alpha she remembered now carried silver at his temples and weariness in his eyes. Elena knew she had changed too. 5 years of raising a daughter alone had left quiet strength where innocence had once been. You found us, she said softly. I did. She waited, expecting excuses, expecting explanations. Instead, Adrian slowly removed a sealed envelope from inside his coat. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. I came to give you the truth. He placed the envelope on the wooden table beside her garden, then stepped back. Elena hesitated before opening it. Inside lay the official DNA report. She read the first page, then the second. Her hands began to tremble. No, she whispered. This can't be. At that moment, footsteps approached from the road. A woman carrying a small travel bag stopped a few yards away. Blonde hair, blue eyes. The same woman Elena had seen in Adrian's study 5 years earlier. Except now, she looked just as frightened as Elena felt. Without speaking, the woman reached into her bag and removed a delicate silver necklace, a crescent moon. Its twin rested inside the envelope beside the DNA report. My name is Claire, she whispered. I don't expect you to believe me. Her voice cracked. But I've searched for you. My whole life. Elena looked from the necklace to Claire's face. Then something caught her eye. Just behind Claire's left ear rested a tiny crescent-shaped birthmark. Her breath stopped. She remembered her mother's stories. If you ever lose your little sister, you'll always recognize her by the little moon behind her ear. Elena slowly reached out with trembling fingers. She brushed a strand of Claire's hair aside. The birthmark was real, not a dream, not another misunderstanding. My mother, Elena whispered through tears. She used to kiss that little mark every night before bed. Claire covered her mouth as sobs escaped her. I remember, not clearly, but I remember someone singing to me. Elena's knees gave way. Claire caught her before she fell. For the first time in 25 years, the sisters embraced. Neither cared who was watching. Neither tried to stop crying. They mourned birthdays they had never shared. Childhood memories stolen by war. Parents who had died believing one daughter was lost forever. 5 years of unnecessary separation, caused by a truth that had arrived too late. From a respectful distance, Adrian watched silently. He realized this reunion had never belonged to him. He had already taken enough from Elena. He would not steal this moment too. Without saying a word, he quietly turned and walked toward the shoreline, giving the sisters something they had been denied for nearly a quarter of a century: time. As the sun began setting over the sea, Elena looked toward Adrian's retreating figure. For the first time since that terrible night, she didn't see the man she believed had betrayed her. She saw the man who had come without excuses, and finally brought her family home. Adrian didn't leave the village. He simply stopped asking for anything. Rather than return to the palace, he rented a tiny cottage near the fishing docks. It had a leaking roof, uneven floors, and barely enough room for a bed and a table. It was the first place he had ever lived without servants. The fishermen found it amusing. "The king doesn't know how to mend a net," one old sailor laughed. "I suppose I'm about to learn," Adrian replied. By the end of the week, his hands were blistered. By the end of the month, they were rough with honest work. Every morning, he helped repair damaged fishing boats before sunrise. Every afternoon, he carried lumber and stone to Elena's refuge, expanding the small building to shelter more abandoned mothers and children. He never entered unless invited. He simply worked until sunset and quietly went home. Claire noticed first. "He's trying very hard," she told Elena one evening. "I know. He hasn't asked you to forgive him. No. He hasn't even tried to explain himself again." Elena watched Adrian through the window as he repaired a broken swing for the children. "He's finally listening instead of talking." Weeks became months. Slowly, the village stopped seeing a king. They saw a man who stayed long after the work was finished. One afternoon, Claire shared her dream of creating a center dedicated to reuniting families separated by war. Before she finished explaining, Adrian unrolled a map across the table. The old customs house could be renovated. The harbor gives families from every kingdom easy access. Claire blinked. "You'd help? I already owe one family 25 years. If I can help reunite others, I'd like to." Construction began the following week. The villagers volunteered without hesitation. So did Adrian. His title mattered less than the hammer in his hands. The person who changed most, however, was little Lily. At first, she hid behind Elena whenever Adrian visited. Then she began asking questions. "Can you really build boats?" "Sometimes." "Can kings climb trees?" "I probably shouldn't," she grinned. "But can you?" Adrian laughed. "Yes." "Then show me." Soon, the afternoons belonged to them. They built toy sailboats, collected seashells, read stories beneath the old lighthouse. One rainy evening, Lily climbed onto the porch beside Adrian while he sanded a wooden toy horse. She watched him quietly, then asked the question he had dreaded for 5 years. "Are you really my daddy?" His hands became still. He could have answered with certainty. Instead, he chose honesty. "I hope I can be. I wasn't there when you learned to walk. I missed your first birthday. I missed too much." He looked into her bright blue eyes. "But if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making up for it." Lily thought about that very seriously. Finally, she wrapped both arms around his neck. "You already are." Adrian closed his eyes as tears slipped silently down his face. From the open doorway, Elena watched everything. There were no grand speeches, no promises of forever, only a father who had stopped demanding another chance and started earning one. For the first time since leaving the palace, she felt something she never expected to feel again. Not certainty, not complete forgiveness, but hope, small, fragile, and quietly growing with every ordinary day they spent rebuilding what silence had once destroyed. 1 year later, the little coastal village had become known across the continent. Not because of its beautiful harbor, not because an alpha king had once lived there, in a weathered fisherman's cottage. People came because of the place built at the edge of the sea, Moonlight Family House. Its doors never closed. Every morning, wagons arrived carrying children searching for parents, grandparents searching for grandchildren, and brothers and sisters separated by war, disasters, or years of uncertainty. Maps covered the walls. Letters arrived from every kingdom. Volunteers worked late into the night comparing records, translating documents, and following forgotten trails that might lead one family back to another. The dream had begun with Claire. The heart of it belonged equally to Elena. And Adrian had quietly funded every stone, every bed, and every meal without asking for recognition. When the sanctuary officially opened, rulers, merchants, and village elders gathered beneath white banners embroidered with a silver crescent moon. Lily, now 6 years old, proudly stood beside her mother and aunt, greeting every visitor with a smile. The master of ceremonies invited Adrian to address the crowd. He walked to the platform without his royal cloak, without his crown. He wanted them to hear not a king, but a husband and father who had learned the cost of silence. "There was a time," he began, "when I believed betrayal destroyed my family." He looked toward Elena. "I was wrong. The truth is, my family was separated because one conversation happened a few minutes too late." The crowd fell completely silent. "I thought there would always be another chance to explain. There wasn't. I thought love alone could survive unanswered questions. It couldn't." He paused, taking a slow breath. "If this house saves even one family from losing years the way we did, then every stone here has been worth laying." Many in the audience quietly wiped away tears. Adrian stepped down from the stage and walked toward Elena. He stopped several feet away, not expecting anything, not asking for anything, only grateful that she was standing there. Elena looked down at the silver mate bracelet resting in her hands. She had carried it inside her pocket for months. Every day she wondered whether putting it back on would erase the pain. Eventually, she realized it wouldn't erase anything. It would simply acknowledge how far they had both come. She slowly slipped the bracelet back onto her wrist. A quiet gasp swept through the crowd. Adrian's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to. I know." She smiled gently. "I'm not choosing the past." She stepped closer. "I'm choosing the man you've become." Claire laughed through happy tears. "I've waited 25 years to have my sister." She looked at Adrian with a grin. "I'm not losing my brother now." The crowd erupted into warm applause. Before either adult could say another word, Lily squeezed between them. She grabbed her mother's hand, then her father's. "There," she smiled proudly. "Now nobody can get lost again." Laughter echoed across the sanctuary. As the wolves hidden in the surrounding hills lifted their voices beneath the full moon, Elena realized something she had never believed possible. The misunderstanding had changed all of them forever. It had stolen years that could never be returned, but it had also taught them that love was not proven by perfect moments. It was proven by the courage to rebuild after everything had fallen apart. Together, the four of them walked through the doors of Moonlight Family House. Not as a family restored to what it had once been, but as a stronger one, built upon truth, forgiveness, and the promise that no silence would ever again come between them. 5 years after Moonlight Family House opened its doors, its work had spread far beyond the little coastal village. What began as a single refuge overlooking the sea had grown into a network of family reunification centers across 7 kingdoms. Every center followed the same promise. No child would stop searching because they were poor. No parent would be turned away because too much time had passed. Every missing name deserved one more chance. Letters arrived by the hundreds each week. Some carried photographs faded by decades. Others contained only a first name and a memory. Yet somehow, hope kept finding its way through the doors. Claire became the director of the growing organization. Having lived most of her own life believing she had no family, she understood better than anyone what it meant to search for someone whose face you could barely remember. She trained volunteers to compare old census records, refugee lists, military reports, and orphanage registries. Never assume someone is gone forever, she often reminded them. Sometimes, they're simply waiting to be found. Elena continued serving as the organization's chief healer. Families often arrived exhausted after weeks of travel. Before asking questions, she offered warm soup, clean clothes, and a safe bed. Healing begins long before answers do, she told every new volunteer. Adrian quietly kept his promise. He never used the sanctuary to improve his reputation. Instead, he expanded funding for missing person registries throughout the kingdom and ordered border records from previous wars to be opened to the public. For years, forgotten documents had gathered dust inside royal archives. Now they reunited families almost every month. One afternoon, Lily, now 11 years old, watched as an elderly woman embraced a son she had not seen in 32 years. Neither could stop crying. Neither cared who was watching. Later, as they walked home along the beach, Lily slipped her hand into Adrian's. "Do you think we'll ever stop finding families?" He smiled. "I hope not." "Why?" "Because every family we find means someone refused to give up." She thought quietly, before asking another question. "Were you scared when Mama came back?" Adrian looked toward Elena and Claire walking ahead of them. "Terrified. I thought she might never forgive me. But she did. Not all at once. She forgave me one ordinary day at a time." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "I like that better." "So do I." That evening, Elena found Adrian repairing a broken wooden bench outside the sanctuary. "You know," she teased gently, "most kings hire carpenters." He tightened the final bolt and smiled. "I've met the carpenter. He's much better than I am." She laughed. "That's true." He looked at the families gathering inside for dinner. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't opened that study door?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes." "And?" She rested her head lightly against his shoulder. "I think we still would have found each other again." He looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes, because the truth has a remarkable way of surviving. It may arrive late, but eventually, it comes home." As the sun disappeared beyond the sea, lanterns illuminated Moonlight Family House. Children's laughter drifted through the evening air. Inside those walls, strangers became brothers, sisters found one another again, and parents held children they had once believed were gone forever. The sanctuary had become far more than a building. It had become proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, when people chose truth over silence and hope over despair. Above the entrance, workers carefully uncovered a newly carved stone. Its inscription would be revealed during the following spring's anniversary celebration. 10 years after the doors of Moonlight Family House first opened, its lantern still burned every night. Travelers said they could see its warm light from the sea long before the village appeared on the horizon. To many, it was more than a sanctuary. It was the place where hope came to wait. Families from every kingdom crossed mountains, rivers, and oceans, carrying old photographs, faded letters, worn lockets, and memories that refused to disappear. Some searches lasted weeks. Others took decades. Yet every reunion reminded the volunteers why they never stopped trying. On the sanctuary's 10th anniversary, hundreds of families gathered in the courtyard for a celebration unlike any before it. Among them were children who had found parents, parents who had found children, brothers reunited with sisters, grandparents embracing grandchildren they had believed were lost forever. Standing beneath white banners embroidered with silver crescent moons, Elena looked over the crowd with quiet gratitude. Years earlier, she believed her life had ended the moment she walked away from the palace. Now she understood. It had simply begun a different chapter. Claire stepped beside her and smiled. "Quite a view," Elena laughed softly. "I still can't believe this all started, because you walked into Adrian's study." Claire shook her head. "I've apologized for that 1,000 times, and I've forgiven you 1,001. The sisters linked arms as they watched volunteers guiding newly reunited families toward the celebration hall. Nearby, Adrian stood with Lily, who was now a confident young teenager helping register visitors. She had inherited Elena's kindness and Adrian's steady determination. A little boy approached Adrian shyly. "Your Majesty, my teacher said you built this place." Adrian smiled and shook his head. "No, your queen built it." He looked toward Elena and Claire, and so did her sister. "I simply helped carry the lumber." The adults nearby laughed. One elderly visitor recognized Elena and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, what changed your life forever?" The question surprised everyone. Many expected her to speak about the misunderstanding, or the years she spent raising Lily alone. Instead, Elena reached for Claire's hand. "My sister." She smiled through grateful tears. "I thought I had lost my husband." She gently squeezed Claire's fingers. "In the end, I found my family." Claire rested her head briefly against Elena's shoulder. "And I found mine." As the applause faded, Adrian stepped toward the stone monument, standing at the sanctuary entrance. With Lily beside him, he pulled away the white silk covering. The inscription carved into the stone read, "Some families are broken by distance, others by silence. Both deserve another chance." No one spoke for several moments. The words needed no explanation. They belonged to every family gathered there. They belonged to Elena and Adrian, to Claire, to Lily, to everyone who had ever believed it was too late to come home. As evening settled over the village, the four of them walked slowly through the sanctuary gardens. Lily slipped naturally between her parents, while Claire walked beside Elena. No one hurried. No one looked back. History remembered the Luna who walked away after believing her mate had betrayed her. History remembered the DNA test that reunited two sisters after 25 years apart. But the people whose lives had been changed by Moonlight Family House remembered something even greater. One misunderstanding had nearly destroyed a marriage. One scientific discovery had restored a family. And one choice, to heal instead of holding on to bitterness, had gone on to reunite thousands more. Because the greatest miracle was never the DNA report itself. It was what everyone chose to do after the truth was finally revealed.